Brittany, welcome to the Big Skip Energy Podcast.
Thank you, Skip. I'm stoked to be here.
Oh, well, we are excited to have you now. Kayla, why don't you introduce our illustrious guest for us?
I would love to. Brittany, thank you for being here. We are honored to have you. For those of you who don't know who Brittany is, she is a global keynote speaker and author. And entrepreneurs have actually called her an expert at creating loyal fans for your brand and is widely regarded as the go-to source on creating and retaining super fans. She's been invited to speak to audiences across the world, including American Express and Sony Music, who you probably know of. My favorite fact about Brittany is she was awarded the distinction of Most Disruptive Marketing Entrepreneur at the Impact Awards. Pretty cool. Brittany is the co-founder of the Superfan Company. It's a multi-million-dollar fan engagement agency, and it's created successful campaigns globally for people like Luke Bryan and Katy Perry even. My second favorite fact about Brittany is she was on Shark Tank and she had 4 offers from sharks, which if you watch Shark Tank, you know that's a big deal. Brittany has been studying, researching, and writing about the phenomenon of fandom for nearly 2 decades. Brittany, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kayla. As I said, I'm stoked to be here and excited to talk to you guys today about creating superfans.
We are pumped because Brittany, the first time I heard of you, I was actually telling Skip this. The first time I had heard about you, I was on LinkedIn. I am connected to someone that you're connected with, and you had sent them your book. And they had opened up your book beautifully. And inside of it was this video of you speaking to the person receiving the gift of the book. And I said to myself, who is this girl? And she's sending a gift and she's blowing it out of the water doing this. And so I started following you. And literally that same day, I'm in mortgage and my MI rep said, hey, go follow this girl, Kayla. She reminds me a lot of you. And I said, I already am. I'm already a super fan. And from there, I've been following you. And that's why we wanted to have you on the show, because we feel like what you're doing is so cool and so needed in any business that has customers.
Well, thank you. Oh my gosh, that's so kind. Thank you, Kayla. I am so glad that we connected on LinkedIn, and I'm excited that you are as excited about this message as I am, because I agree. I think at some point over the past several decades, we've gotten away from customer experience. We've gotten away from the idea that customer centricity has to be something that is embraced at every level of your organization, from the bottom up and from the top down. And so I'm excited to be a torchbearer for that message.
Hey, we love it. And I think a lot of people probably know what superfan means. A lot don't. Can you tell our audience today what your definition or glimpse of superfan means?
Absolutely. So I define a superfan as a customer who is so delighted by their experience with you, whether it's a product, a service, a brand, that they will come back and tell their friends. So they become a loyal, enthusiastic advocate.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like you have to explain that often, or do people actually really understand? Do they actually get it when you hear that term? Do most people understand?
I think a lot of times people get it. It's so funny. When I launched my first company back at the end of 2010, I wanted to call it the Superfan Company out of the gate. And it was a marketing and entertainment agency. And I was working with Walmart as my first big client. And everybody was like, yeah, I don't know about the word superfan. Like, it feels a little fringe. It sounds like, the people who are like adults, but they still live in their parents' basement because they play video games all day, or, like 12-year-old Justin Bieber fans or One Direction fans. And I was like, no, like anybody can be a super fan. And so it's been so interesting to see, because that was, 13 years ago. Over the past decade, the word has really just exploded in its popularity and also in its like pop culture lexiconness. That's a scientific term, by the way. If you
can you spell that for me?
But it's something that now I think people are wearing as a badge of honor. And I think some of that is because of the ability to connect with other fans online, and the way that so many people are embracing their customers or fans, or, depending on the industry, like season ticket holders or frequent flyers or people who are buying festival or concert tickets. So I think that people understand the concept of superfan much more now than they would have, even 10 years ago. But ultimately, a superfan is a customer who creates more customers. So whatever industry you're in, whatever it is that you're doing, superfans are those customers who are out there creating more customers for you, which is why it's so important to have a strategy to identify, retain, and enable them.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I agree with that. Skip, can you think of a time you become a super fan of something?
Well,
I'm curious.
Before I tell you that, it's actually really, really funny because Brittany, I'm coming off of a couple of day training with a bank, and one of the things that we focused on was building a referral business, right? And so there's the classic 3 levels of referrals. You get a name with an introduction, then you get a name introduction and a pre-sale. Superfan actually takes it a step further and not only says, hey, let's do all those things. They're already working for you out there actively, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, like the joke I make sometimes is like, what's better than asking the kid you like to the dance and them saying yes? Having that kid ask you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, this is about not just saying like, I want to ask you, so you say yes. This is having people out there talk about you so that people are like, oh my gosh, I want to work with this company. I want to work with this brand. I want to work with this person. So it's that reputation for being amazing. I always say like, your brand isn't your logo. Maybe that was true 50, 60, 70 years ago, where you were in charge of your brand because you were, running newspaper ads or like black and white TV ads, or I don't know, whatever people did 70 years ago. But that's not the case anymore. Now your brand is what your customers say it is. It's how people describe their experience with you to their friends and to strangers on the internet. So Creating Superfans is really a product of, treating your customers in a way that makes them excited to go out and evangelize for you.
Right.
I like that. Oh, Kayla. So super fan for me.
Yeah.
Other than being a super fan of yours, right? You mean besides that?
That was good, Skip.
Yeah,
you get
yeah. I get good. I get some brownie points for that. So to the level that Brittany has defined that, I think the reason I'm having a hard time thinking of the last time I could be considered that is because it's so hard to attain that status. You got to work so hard, and so I think a lot of the different companies or organizations we belong to or brands that we like, they do a good job, but a lot of them struggle taking that next step to creating that, and that's a big differentiator in my opinion. Is the work and things that have to transpire to push that over the edge to becoming a super fan. So, excuse me. So, Brittany, like, what does it take to transition from being a solid, reputable provider of a service to creating super fans? Like, describe to me that transition.
Well, I love the question. In my book, I talk about this idea of what I call the ladder to super fandom and the different levels and the different steps. And what you just described is kind of the top 2 levels of going from affinity, which is I like it, to advocacy, which is I like it so much that I'm telling people. And that's one of the biggest steps that you have to bridge for your customers. And part of this whole ladder to super fandom idea is that there is a force out there working that I think is the most, detrimental, most destructive, most threatening thing in business. And it gets very little attention. And that is apathy. So lots of people tell me like, we have an awareness problem. Not enough people know about, this great product we have or this great service that we have. Like if we could just get more people to know, if we could just get more people to know what we do, then everything would change. And that is almost never the case. Like it has never been easier to get your message in front of exactly the right person that you want. But because of that, it has never been harder to get people's attention. Right? Like you can get in front of them, but in order to get their attention, to make them care, you've got to overpower that apathy because we're all busy. We all have a million things going on. And the way you overpower that apathy, the way you make someone care is by explaining why your thing is relevant in their life. Like, how are you making their life better? And, one of the things that I say over and over again in the book is that super fans are created at the intersection of your story and every customer story, where you make your thing relevant to their life. That's how you overpower apathy. And that's how you take someone from that affinity of like, oh, I really like this, to advocacy, which is, this was transformational for me. So I want to tell others because I want them to know about this great thing that I have found.
I love it.
And that's kind of where also the storytelling can come in, is when you can relate and find something that can really correlate with the client. It's not about, in our world, it's not about a rate or a house at the end of the day. It's about, how did you make them feel? And they're not looking for a solution, like you said, Brittany, I've heard you say it before, to a home for a family. It's their family, and every person's going to have different requirements and hurdles. And until you ask the questions and dig deeper and find out where their pain points are, you're never really going to know. And so instead of saying, here's your house, here's your rate, they're going to remember the way you made them feel as well.
Yeah, I'm going to take that a step
Absolutely.
further and not just say, not to say it's not just their pain points, but you got to find the pleasure points. Say, what makes them happy? What makes them feel good? That's going to create a better connection. It's kind of like, just like Brittany said, that status quo is your biggest enemy. The apathy, the not willingness to change. What's in it for them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why, what's the stat that only like 1 in 5 borrowers will go back to the LO that they used last time when it's time to get another loan. And I think apathy is a huge part of the reason why. And I think another reason is because, going back to the idea of customer centricity that I talked about, and the importance of like really trying to understand and see things through your customer's eyes. A lot of times people who work in the mortgage industry think of the customer journey from the first time they talk to a client to the loan being closed, or sometimes cleared to close, and then they're like sort of checked out. But to your customer, it's so much more than that. It's the entire before period, before the LO even knows who the customer is and that they exist. When they're doing research, they're trying to figure out what they need to know. They're wondering, like, what do I actually have to do to get pre-approved for a mortgage? And what paperwork am I going to need? And what's that process look like? So all of that research that they're doing, during which any step of that journey, they could disqualify you from consideration because they're like, yeah, no, this person doesn't have a very good website, or they haven't updated their social posts in 2 months. So like, maybe they're not even in the mortgage industry anymore. So all of that like before stuff, and then also the after stuff. So I know for me, part of what made my first home buying experience frustrating was because, well, I was working with banks. So like that whole part of the loan process was frustrating. And I like never heard from the mortgage officer after closing day. And so I started getting all of these postcards in the mail that were like, fluorescent green and pink and orange, that said like, call us immediately about this loan. And they had my loan number. And I was like, are these legit? Are they a scam? What's going on? So I had to call and leave a voicemail. He didn't call me back. Then all of a sudden I get something saying your loan has been sold and it's going to be serviced by somebody else now. And I was like, what does that mean? Did I do something wrong? And so then I went ahead and registered online to like do my mortgage payment with that company. And then before the first payment was due, my loan got sold again. And I was like, what is happening? Is this going to happen every month? Like, what does this mean? So for people, especially who have never been through the home buying process before, there are so many questions that they're going to have that they don't know to ask during the homeowner, the actual mortgage process, because they've like never been through it before. So when you think about your customer's experience, you've got to think not just about that during part, but before and after as well, because that's how superfans are created. When you pay attention, when you walk that entire process with them and like wrap it up with a bow, and then say like, oh, by the way, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm still going to be here when you have a question, when you need a recommendation for, I don't know, an electrician or a gardener or whatever. Or if you just have a financial question about like, when should you refi, or, what should you be paying attention to? Letting people know that you're not piecing out just because you're like getting the commission from that loan and moving on to the next.
Yep.
I think it's a solid issue that we're seeing, is that especially in the mortgage world today, is things have changed. The tide has turned, right? you have people that are fighting for deals and they're trying to just get a referral. And they're so busy thinking about that next new lead. They're not thinking about how to take care of their clients. And I always say the moment that my client has to reach out to me and ask me what's next, I feel like I failed. So my goal, and maybe Skip, you've experienced this, with your line, is that I say, here's what the expectation is. We're going to do this, this, this. There's truthfully, if they have to ask a question, it's a general question, but then to exceed those expectations, then is it go to your closing, show up, ask questions, tell them I'm here. Here's my cell phone, call, text. I think a lot of lenders do not even do that. And it's sad, but that's how the rest of us stand out and make a difference and create those super fans.
It's sad for those customers, but convenient for you that putting in that work makes you stand out so much in your field.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel, Brittany and Skip, this is a question for you too, I think. We're in this world of technology with social media. Probably we're overwhelmed with it a little bit, but as a lot of our audience are loan officers or people in sales. So do you feel that social media has helped people to create super fans? Given that a lot of clients aren't meeting in person anymore. So you've got the opportunity to reach out further, but you don't have that face-to-face contact. Even people in my hometown, I truthfully don't even meet them face-to-face until closing. How do you guys feel about how social media has helped shaped the way to get super fans?
Well, I think it has helped in a lot of ways because it has never in the history of the world been as easy as it is right now to connect with people, to stay in touch with people, not just to see what's happening in their lives on social media, but also to be able to use technology to send them a text or a voice memo or, to send mass mailings either through email or through the mail. Like, it's so easy to use technology to stay in touch. And while I do think that has helped quicken the journey to somebody becoming a super fan because they feel like they get to know you that much faster, they feel that much more connected with you, it's also created a lot of noise and a lot of static. So if you want to deepen those relationships and strengthen that affinity that somebody feels toward you, you have to be intentional about the way you're using the tools. You have to be intentional about the way you're using social media, not as just like a megaphone to promote yourself, but as a way to really understand your customers, connect with them, comment on the things that are happening in their lives so that they feel like they're getting to know you, not just like your title or your role in sales or in mortgage.
Yeah, see, I think there's a lot to that, and social media has done a great job of making one of the cornerstones of a good sales strategy, which is the law of familiarity. Done a great job of making that easier to do because all of a sudden you can get exposed to, like Brittany said, whoever you want super easily, right? But at the same time, of course, it does have its limitations. So that's why we still have to pick up the phone and or go see somebody, that kind of thing. And there's definite pluses and minuses. Kayla does a great job of leveraging social media to help better connect because her borrowers, prospective customers, get to see a glimpse into her life, so that gives them that familiarity. It's not just Kayla sharing a post of a home for sale or something like that. And it's kind of like the person that you connect with on LinkedIn. They're connected. They don't go through and like any of your posts. They don't comment on any of your posts. Then the next thing you know, you've got a sales pitch in your messages. And it's like, that's the misuse of social media. That's too easy for them to do that. But and that's why that's just not very successful. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it.
No, you're spot on. And one thing I want to get into is obviously, Brittany, you've written this book that was it January 10th this came out?
January 10th. Yeah. So we just celebrated our 2-month birthday. Hey,
well, happy birthday. One of the things, obviously, in the book, it talks about the mythology behind super fans. And so you have this method, and it's the super method. Are you able to break down a little bit what that means for our audience?
I would love to. So I think that I was going to say as Americans, but probably just like as humans, we have the tendency to overcomplicate things, right? We want to like over engineer things. We want to come up with like all of these difficult systems. And what I really wanted to do was distill what I think are the most important parts of customer experience, but also sales, marketing, operations, technology, into a framework that anyone could easily learn,
Mhm.
share with their team, and then track the results of and iterate over time. So the supermodel is my attempt at that. So, and it's fun to be like, I know a supermodel, right? So if you want to create super fans, you've got to be super. And that acronym SUPER is start with your story. And what I mean by start by your story is not like lead with your story. It's you've got to understand why you deserve super fans. What are you doing that is worthy of that advocacy? So how are you different from everyone else who does what you do? And this is something that I love to talk about with other loan professionals, Kayla, because it's very much a commodity market. It's very much like I am someone doing a very similar thing that 500,000 other people across America do. Pick me. So the way you go from that potential commodity provider in the minds of your prospects and your customers to a category of one is with your story. So telling your origin story, talking about your superpowers, what you're the best in the world at, or what you're committed to becoming the best in the world at. Because if you don't know why you're better than your competitors, a customer stands no chance at ever figuring it out.
This brings a tear to my eyes. This is gorgeous. This is
Like, if
great
you
stuff.
don't
I
know,
love it.
how are they going to know? Or if your answer is something silly, like, I always love when I'm like, okay, why should a prospect or customer pick you? And somebody says, well, because I've been doing this for 20 years. And I'm
What
like,
does that mean? That doesn't mean a
cool.
damn
So
thing.
if Bob's been doing it for 25 years, should I pick him? Like, does that make him 25% better than you? So you've got to understand your why. You've got to understand your uniqueness and your superpower. So that's the first part of the supermodel. That S pillar is start with your story.
So when you have, and I'm going to use the lender again or a sales professional, when you talk about that, start with your story, do you feel like people struggle to even have a story, to be able to even, as they say, niche down? A lot of people I feel like struggle with it. Wrong, right?
I feel like everyone has a story, but some people do struggle with being able to identify and articulate it, because coming up with your own story is infinitely harder than coming up with somebody else's. So something that I like to recommend is to partner up with a friend. It could be a professional friend, a personal friend. It can even be a customer who you've worked with, and almost just interview them. Ask them, what do you really like about working with me? What about working with me feels different than other people that you've worked with in the past? I have an entire set of prompts and questions in the book to help kind of guide people through this. Another exercise that I have found to be really helpful when I've done workshops to help people get clear on their story is I say, imagine you are competing on a reality TV show. Like any show you want, doesn't matter. Pick whatever your favorite show is. Every show has some version of what they call a home package, which is where they're introducing that contestant and they're telling you why you should care. They're giving you a little bit about their background, maybe a little bit about their family, a little bit about their career. And the point is to hook you. It's to make you care. It's to make you say like, okay, now this isn't just like one of 15 girls. This is Susie and I like Susie and I'm rooting for her. So imagine you're a reality TV producer and you're trying to get someone to care about you in like 30 seconds. What would you say? What would you talk about? And use that as a jumping off point to start to craft your story.
And I think a lot of people need to even just get a little bit more creative and dig deep and be empathetic, because we're here to provide solutions, right, to someone's problems. And one of the things that I learned is not just to say, hi, I'm Kayla. I'm a mortgage lender. I work at this company. It's, hi, my name is Kayla. And the thing that I use is I'm a mortgage meteorologist and I help people, with that next step of trying to predict what's going to happen and to be able to help navigate that maze of home ownership. What's more memorable? I'm a lender, or that kind of elevator speech, the truth. I think that just helps people stand out in general.
100%. And, you know, I've said before that super fans are created at the intersection of your story and every
Mhm.
customer's story. And I love that you mentioned empathy, because that's the next pillar of the supermodel. U stands for understand your customer story, because once you got clarity on yours to be able to say, hi, I'm Kayla, I'm the mortgage meteorologist, then the next part is knowing the right questions to ask to really get to understand your customer. What are they struggling with? What's the transformation they're looking for? What are they really nervous about? Like, what are they afraid to tell you because it might make them feel silly or, you know, uneducated or whatever. So really creating like a safe space, showing up with that empathy before you show them the authority to really, you know, connect your story to theirs, to really make yourself come to life. And so many people don't do this with their customers. One of the things I like to joke about is like, I remember the first time I saw a teacher outside of school when I was in like first grade, and it just broke my brain, right? Like I was,
Like, don't you live there? Isn't
what
that
is
what?
she
Yeah.
doing here? Like
Who let
they
you
let
out?
teachers go to the grocery store. Like it just,
I too.
you guys remember that? Do you remember how like, yeah, it's like something that sticks in your brain because you're like, what?
Mhm.
And so many people only view their customers in this like very limited one-dimensional way. It's like I
Mhm.
never give any consideration to your family or your interests or your career or anything else, because all you are to me is a loan number. All you are is like a deal I'm trying to close. And
Mhm.
that's such a bad way just in general to like treat another
Mhm.
human, but you're also then missing out on so much, because if that customer is never anything more than a deal to you, you will never be anything more than the other end of the deal to them.
That is spot on because it makes me think about, it's not just us on the front line as salespeople. We've got a whole team behind us, right? Brittany, what would you say to people that are, I'm the front line. I care. I've gotten to know my client. I've asked questions. We've met. How do you get a team on board that may not meet the client? That is, let's just say operations. How do you allow people to really come together and align for the same goal at that point when they may never even see the client?
Oh, such a great question, Kayla. So I have a whole section in the book called Creating Super Teams that's all about how to foster that sense of customer centricity in your business. Because somebody who's working in operations or underwriting or whatever may think that they don't have a direct impact on the customer, but you know that they absolutely do. You know, whether that means that extra couple hours that it took them to look at an email or those extra few days to get something approved, it absolutely matters. And if they're just like firing off a one off email to the customer or something that's maybe just somebody else on your team that's getting forwarded to your customer, it does all matter. So in
Mhm.
the book, I talk about this concept of intentional experience design. And intentional experience design is deciding what you want your customer's journey to be, how you want them to feel, how you're going to handle all of the things that come up to ensure that you've got a plan, essentially, that every member of your team can follow. Everybody knows what is expected. Like,
Mhm.
this is what normal looks like. We're not settling for normal. We're going above and beyond.
Mhm.
And in the part of the book where I talk about intentional experience design, I know you haven't read the book, Skip, but I can tell from the display behind you that you are into Lego. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
All
I am
right.
a grown man that does Lego.
I mean, it's totally fine. I wish I had known that, because I would have sent you my Lego that I made, which I'm going to show you while I while I tell you the story. So in the book, I talk about the first time my family and I went to Legoland, and we
Oh,
oh, they're taking a picture. Sorry, I just got to put
I
right. Maybe you can
don't know
edit that
why I
out. I
did
was like,
that.
what is this weird podcast
yeah,
message?
what was
Yeah,
that?
sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem at all. So, well, here, I'll go ahead and show you my Lego person.
Oh, I love it. I
This
love
is
it.
Oh my
Lego
gosh.
Brittany. She's reading
It
her
has
book.
the Creating Superfans book. That's amazing. I love
Yes.
that.
So in the book, I talk about the first time we went to Legoland. And we went to Legoland. My boys were 2 and 4 at the time. We stayed at the hotel, and there was an elevator there that was like so fun. They had floor to ceiling decals of these dancing minifigures. There was a mirror ball hanging from the ceiling. There were lights in all the corners that changed colors, like LED flashing lights. And every time you closed the door, disco music played. So my kids thought this was the best elevator ever. It was like a dance party. It was so fun. They were like, Mom, there's a party in the elevator. It was really cool. I didn't realize until about the third day that we were at the resort that that was the slowest elevator I had ever been on in my life. Like literally, it was the slowest elevator. It took like the whole song Dancing Queen to get from the lobby to the 5th floor. And it was small. So it was like one family at a time. You could barely fit like 4 people and a little bit of luggage on the elevator. And this was still like COVID protocol. So it was like one family at a time anyway. But it took me like 8 or 9 elevator rides to even think about the fact that it was a slow elevator because we were having such a great time. And then even after I realized it, I didn't mind because it wasn't about the speed. It was about the experience. And every single person who works in sales has slow elevators in their business. Like it is unavoidable. There are things somewhere in your customer's journey that are going to feel like a slow elevator. And it may not be in your control to replace that elevator or, add nitrogen, or that's probably not what makes elevators go faster, but like whatever makes elevators go faster. It's a good thing I'm not an engineer. But that doesn't mean you can't address the slow elevator, not by making it go faster, but by turning it into a disco dance party, by using creativity and communication to reframe what it is that your customer is experiencing. And if you can do that, if you can take those slow elevators and turn them into experiences, your customers will enjoy working with you more. They'll have these magical moments to tell their friends about, and they're that much more likely to remember you and come back when it's time to be, when it's time to do business with you or someone like you again. They're more likely to pick you.
I love that. I love that whole, you took a story and you quite literally put it together with what every company probably deals with. I know our borrowers are going to wait sometimes, and, to get in front of it though and say, hey, no news is good news. We'll reach out, but it's the experience. I love that. Now you got to you. So we got S and U.
Yes,
So
S and U.
Per left.
We have 3 left.
Yeah, per. So P stands for personalize. And in this pillar, I talk about the idea that people expect personalization now, because your customers aren't just comparing working with you to your competitors. They're comparing the experience to the best experience they've ever had. Right? They are like, oh, well, if Amazon can tell me exactly where my driver is 7 stops away, like, why can't you tell me where this is at in your underwriting process? Like, I want to know exactly what's going on at every single step of the journey. So in the book, I talk about ways to balance the high tech with the high touch. So using systems and processes to automate things that can be automated, while then freeing up more of your time to focus on those personal human things that can't yet be automated. And every single one of the pillars of the supermodel is like a nesting doll. They all build on the one that comes before. So SUP, you've got your story, then you've got theirs. The third step is where you kind of bring it all together. You treat them as the individual. And by doing that, that's a really great segue to the 4th pillar, which is E, exceed expectations. And that's where some of the things that we've been talking about throughout the show come in, the intentional experience design, the, figuring out what your slow elevators are so that you can address them before, during, and after the customer's journey. I'm a huge believer that there's only 3 types of experiences people ever have. At the end of any experience, they feel better, worse, or exactly the same. So your job is to make people feel better. Or if you've got like difficult news to deliver or something's going not as planned, how can you intentionally design that interaction so that instead of negative, it's neutral? At the end, somebody feels like, okay, well, at least I understand what's going on. I've got a plan. I know what the next steps are, and I know somebody is working on my behalf. So those are some of the ways that you can exceed your customers' expectations.
Do you feel that service recovery is, when things go wrong, like you said, do you feel that service recovery is an opportunity for someone to take them to a super fan? I know in my experiences with truly anything in life, if something goes wrong, sometimes the company will make it so much better that had that issue not have happened, I don't know if I would have become a super fan because they've corrected it and then went above and beyond. Do you feel that way too?
I feel that way, and the research shows this again and
Yeah,
again and again.
100%.
So in the 90s, some psychologists phrased something called, or coined something that they called the service recovery paradox, which is exactly what you just said. If something goes wrong and you fix it, somebody is going to be more likely to become loyal than if nothing went wrong in the first place. And this has been studied again and again and again over the past 3 or 4 decades, and every single time the results are the same. People spend more money and are more loyal if something goes wrong, particularly like early in the process, because they're connecting with you then on a human to human level. And what research shows is that for the most part, people don't expect you to be perfect. Obviously, there are outliers. If you're like a brain surgeon or a pilot, like, yes, perfection is what is expected. But for most of us, for most of the jobs that we do, people don't expect you to be perfect. They expect you to try your best and to fix something when something goes wrong. And the service recovery paradox is, the perfect example of that. That if you can step in and show someone that you care, now you've created an opportunity to connect with them on a human to human level. You've created an interaction that might not exist otherwise. Now, that does not mean you should try to like mess something up to have that happen, but it is a nice, like, making lemonade out of lemons point to customer experience.
And I think people connect to others. We've talked about it before on, probably on some of our other podcasts, Skip, but we're in this box, right? And, Brittany, you're in a box, Skip, you're in a box, and people see us and it's just perfect. And that's how they judge you. But when you fail in front of people, whether it's a client or a referral partner, and you own it and you're transparent and you make it right, absolutely, that's an opportunity to stand out. Then, you might not even have that connection. Then next thing you know, you're at closing and, you don't even really get to know the person as much. So
Yeah,
I love that.
Absolutely.
And so
what's the R?
So R stands for repeat. So for anybody that was like, 5 things, that's a lot to remember. The good news is R is all about repetition, because unfortunately, customer experience is not a set it and forget it. It's not like you check these 4 boxes and then you're done. You've got to continue to show up and be customer centric every day in every interaction. There's a quote that I love from Elizabeth Arden that says, repetition makes reputation and reputation makes customers. So consistently showing up, consistently exceeding expectations because you personalized the experience, because you understood where your story and theirs could overlap. That is the key to creating superfan customers.
I love it. So only 4 to really, really remember, but the most important is to continue to be consistent.
100% is to be consistent.
All right, Brittany. So I got a couple of questions for you. I guess I should have asked this probably at the beginning, but better late than never. So, what inspired you to start doing this kind of work? What happened to you? I mean, who did you so wrong?
What happened? What's your jam?
I'm totally kidding.
So I always wanted to work in the entertainment industry. I got my first job as a radio station mascot when I was 16. And then I started reviewing bands on the radio station website. I worked for record labels and entertainment agencies and just really loved it. And I thought I was going to work in the entertainment industry forever. And I was really fascinated by this idea of fandom, especially like when I would go to a festival and I would see a lot of bands play. And it was like, okay, you are all starting out at about the same level. You've got around the same marketing spends. You've got the same radio teams in some instances working your singles at radio. Why do some of these bands go on to become like the biggest bands in the world and others just like fade away, right? Why do some go viral while others go bust? And so I started to really study this. And what I saw again and again and again was that the bands who paid the most attention to their fans, who actually like hung around to meet them after the show, who actually did meet and greets with them or interviews with them, they were the ones whose fan bases were growing over time. Because what would happen is those same 40 people who came to see you in April would come back to see you in June, and they would bring their friends. And so you would be playing bigger and bigger venues. You would be selling more and more records. You would have your songs requested more and more and more. So I was really fascinated by this connection between artists and their fans. And as I launched my own company to further this sort of idea of fan connection, I started to work with a lot of brands because we were working with Walmart and we were working with all of these huge celebrities. So for instance, when we worked with Taylor Swift, all of a sudden we were also working with Diet Coke. We were working with CoverGirl. We were working with American Greetings, like all these partners that she had. And as we started to architect fan engagement campaigns for these brands, we saw that the same thing was true. The brands that cared more about their customers had customers who cared more about them. It was this two-way street. So I started to get really fascinated by that customer experience marketing side of it. I went back to school. I got a master's degree in consumer behavior. My dad worked in customer service most of my childhood, first as a restaurant manager and then as the customer service manager of a car dealership. And as a kid, I always loved seeing how he treated customers and the way people would talk about him. And so I think that sort of seeped in a little bit. And one day it was like, I woke up and it was like, oh my gosh, this is the exact same thing. Like what I'm doing with artists and what my dad was doing with restaurant customers and car customers is the same. It's all about the experience. And so that sort of led me down this path of thinking about customers as super fans and what you can do to make them loyal and excited about you, even if you're, not a rock star.
I love it. I love it. So unrelated, my second question then, because I know Kayla's got something she's dying, I'm sure, to ask. I can see the look in her eye. So
I love this stuff. I'm dialed in right now.
All right, so I'm going to give you a scenario, Brittany. I want you to tell me what your thoughts are. Let's say you've either you're either a sales professional, or let's just take it to a larger scope and say you're an organization, okay? And you're struggling right now. You say, people are treating us like a commodity. We're struggling to differentiate. We're getting relinquished to price, something like that. Which one of the four aspects of super would you tell them to focus on first?
Always S. And that's why S is start with your story and not just story. Because if you are being reduced to a commodity, there is a reason. So the first thing you're going to do is ask, why do my customers think I'm a commodity? Am I? Like, take that difficult look in the mirror. Like, are you actually doing something that's worthy of them choosing you, not based on cost or speed or proximity or another sort of like commodity decision maker? And that goes back to what I said earlier when I work with people and I say, tell me why you're the best. And they're like, it's like, okay, great. Then you're not the best. So the first part is to take that long, hard look in the mirror and say, what are we the best at? Or what are we committed to becoming the best at? And saying, if you work with us, this is what you get. Like, this is our promise. This is the outcome. This is the transformation we're going to help you with. Because if you can't do that, like, maybe you're a commodity. And that's okay. Like, it's
but
not
you have to behave and expect
model.
such. Yeah.
Right. It's not a sustainable business model. Commodities never last. And you can look, at every industry over the course of history, because somebody always comes along and out innovates you. Somebody can always be faster. They can always be cheaper. They can always be more convenient. So if you are saying like our customers are treating us like a commodity, let that be a wake-up call to say that is not a very good strategy for future-proofing this business, nor is it a very good strategy for future-proofing your workforce. Because if somebody feels like their job is just a paycheck, it's not a passion or even better, a purpose, then they are going to be a flight risk when somebody comes along and offers them more pay, more flexible working hours, whatever other benefit, fill in the blank.
Yeah. So every time I do a training with loan officers, and I always get the same like daggers coming at me whenever I do this, says I will always, at some point in the training, I always throw something out saying, look, if you lose a borrower to an eighth or a quarter in rate, you didn't do something right. And I always get like the worst looks, but it's true. It's true.
Well, it's totally true.
You'll have some people, like you said earlier, that just want to treat it as, they're just going to be focused on that. They don't care what you do for them. But that's not the majority of people. So if you've done the right connections,
would never work with you again anyway. Like,
yeah, exactly.
If somebody is determined to make their decision based on price, that is never going to be a loyal customer. And if you look at them, they are probably not brand loyal in any aspect of their life. And that's
Exactly.
fine. Like, you don't want to waste your time and energy on those customers because they're never coming back anyway.
Yeah.
Or if they are coming back, they're going to make you do like 10 times more work to prove that you're, 1/32 of a point cheaper than somebody else.
1/32. I like it.
Well, and it's true. And one thing that I always think of too is I've been rate shopped before. And one thing I always do is I ask my client, can we talk about, kind of about 20 minutes of your time to discover a little bit about you? And they're sometimes caught off guard. I don't know if the lenders you speak to, Skip, are like that, but it's like, dig in, ask questions. And these people that are rate shopping suddenly say, oh, this person cares about me. Oh, no other lenders asked me about what my biggest fear is with this purchase. And so that's a way to create that rapport as well. It's, starting to ask them questions. The more questions you ask, the more you really dig in and know their story, their family story. And I think if they're like, you're so right, Skip, if they're losing by an eighth, they're not adding value. They're not adding.
They're just not doing their job right. They have not connected. So
no, I agree. Brittany, I have one question as we wrap up for you. My question to you is, in this crazy, chaotic world, we all have so much going on that sometimes people will say, well, I didn't get the chance to give the experience I wanted because there's so much back end. In mortgage, there's so much that we are doing from start to finish that the customer doesn't even see. What would your advice be to someone that is struggling with that is has so much on their plate that they want to continue to give a good experience, but you got to get the loan to closing? What would be a solution in that case to at least start to give that experience, to start creating super fans when they're so busy?
Well, I would say there's always time. If you're that busy, you should take a look at everything on your plate and see what can be automated, what can be delegated, and maybe what can be eliminated.
Delegated, deferred, or discarded.
There you go. Because there is always time to connect with someone, to make someone feel special. And part of the reason that you might be so busy is because you're having to try to get a lot of new leads, top of funnel, to fill it up, because you don't have those referrals coming to you and you haven't made yourself that category of one yet. So I would say trust the process, understand that there is always time. It's like the same people who are like, oh, like my marriage is falling apart because I never have time to connect with my partner. And it's like, really? You walk by them 50 times a day. You don't have time to like give them a hug and a kiss and say, I love you. You don't have time to say like, how was your day? There is always time. It's just how are you using it? So again, creating an intentional experience design plan to say, maybe I can't do 30 things to wow every customer, but here are 2 or 3 things that I can do during the process that are going to make someone feel the love. And I know that if I commit to this one thing that's going to take 10 minutes at the end of every loan, I'm going to be that much more likely to create an ongoing relationship with this customer that's going to span years or even decades. So intentionally designing the few things that you can do to have the maximum impact in the minimum amount of time. And I've got a plan totally laid out for that in Creating Superfans. How to turn.
I love you just did that because I was just about to ask you. Where can our listeners learn more about you, find out more about you and what you do, what you offer, what you're all about?
Well, you can find out what I'm all about at BrittanyHodak.com, and you can pick up a copy of Creating Superfans wherever books are sold. The hardcover is available at all of the chain bookstores, independent bookstores, and Amazon. And there's also an ebook version and an audiobook version that I narrate. So you can pick up Creating Superfans.
Oh, you did your own narration. I love it.
However you want.
Very nice. Very nice. So before we let you go, Brittany, what is one thing about you that would surprise our audience?
One thing that would surprise the audience. I'm a Guinness World Record holder.
Let's have it. 4.
So when I was in college, I was looking for something to do to replace a thesis project that fell apart in the 11th hour. And so I got a bunch of friends together and we created the world's largest Christmas stocking. So We sewed a stocking that was like 60 feet tall. We filled it up with like 13,000 donated toys and gave them all to charities for kids in need in our area. So
amazing.
Wow.
Record holder.
That is phenomenal.
Has nothing to do with anything I do now, but it's a fun
No,
story.
doesn't have to. That was exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Not exactly, but along the lines of what I was hoping you'd give me. That's great.
I'm also really good at finding 4-leaf clovers. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah.
It's the season.
Well, it's the perfect time of year for that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's very strange. I'm not great at Where's Waldo puzzles. Like you would think there would be some correlation, but it is a skill that has absolutely no transference to any other area of life that I have found.
See, I'm a Where's Waldo master.
Oh, and how are you at 4-leaf clovers?
Not very good. I'm hearing there's some possible collaboration opportunities here. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
All right.
Brittany,
Well,
we're so glad you were here. I just have to say, we know that you are you're creating super fans yourself, and we are some of them. We are so honored you were here. We know that our listeners have gained so much value. So again, from Skip and I, thank you so much. It's an honor.
It was an honor for me. Anytime I can be in the presence of big Skip energy, I always say yes.
Yes, I love it.
Thank you guys for bringing it today.
Thank you, Brittany.